Welcome to another screencast, and this time we'll be discussing a little bit about the regulation of respiration. So there's a lot of objectives here, but we're just going to, in this screencast, we're just going to focus on this one here, the local regulation of respiration, and we'll deal with the others in another screencast there. So this local regulation, or the regulation just in general, I guess, about the respiratory system is dealing with the rate of exchange between the rate of exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the alveolar spaces here and then the blood here at the alveoli, so this exchange, but then also the rate of exchange here between the tissues and the blood. And in other screencasts, of course, we've hinted at that this is basically because of the PO2 and then the PCO2 levels. So wherever they are higher, they're going to diffuse away from those areas. But when we talk about locally, the local regulatory effects, we're talking about just locally, meaning like right at this interchange right here between the blood and the alveoli, and again locally right here between the cells and the blood. So what is regulating that, or how do these PO2 and PCO2 levels here at the cells and the tissues versus here at the alveoli, how do they actually play a role in regulating that exchange? Right? So the stimulus locally at the alveoli. So what we're going to look at is at the alveoli. So at the alveoli, where there is a high PO2 and a low PCO2. So this situation would happen right after inhalation, where the high PO2 level is there. So this is the first stimulus. So the alveolar space here, we're going to have a high PO2. So this is a high PO2 here, and then a low PCO2. So this is the stimulus. And then these levels right here will then stimulate the bronchi and the precapillary sphincters to either dilate or constrict. So in this situation, let's deal with the precapillary sphincters here first. So the capillary sphincters here will so let's look at what we're talking about here. So over here, so these capillaries that are having deoxygenated blood go toward them. If the alveoli have a high PO2, then those precapillary sphincters will dilate so that more blood can be delivered to those alveoli. And let's say that these alveoli over here then have a lower PO2, right, than compared to the alveoli over here. So the blood will be diverted over to these alveoli and not to these alveoli here. Right? So what this tells you is that not every single alveolus gets inflated to the exact same degree. Now this is minor, and again this is going to be local, but this is indeed happening here. So this is the stimulus to get these precapillary sphincters here to dilate so that more blood goes to them. And then also, then the third thing that's happening is the bronchioles. The smooth muscle of the bronchioles here will cause these bronchioles to constrict, therefore diverting oxygen-rich air to these alveoli over here. Right? So these are the local effects when the PO2 and the PO2 is high and the PCO2 is low. So given that, if you look at the opposite situation, the alveoli with low PO2 in them and then high PCO2, so again, this is the stimulus here. So now this PO2 is going to be low, so low PO2 and high PCO2. Right? These will cause the capillary sphincters there to constrict, and the bronchi, or bronchioles rather, to dilate. And so it's the opposite effects here. So these relatively high PCO2 what you're going to have is the effect of more air, because of the bronchioles dilate, more air that's rich in O2 being diverted over to this way, and any PCO2, high PCO2 air here will then be able to be exchanged back out this way. And you don't have blood vessels dilating to bring oxygen, poor blood, to an area that has a lower PO2 area in it. Okay? So it might be a good idea to pause and summarize that and redraw that for yourself in some way. Okay? So at the tissues, and we also have this situation happening, so not at the alveolar area, but at the tissue level. So the stimulus here are going to be tissues or cells with a low PO2 and a high PCO2. So this would be a situation where the cells are very active. Right? So exercising cells, muscle cells that are extremely active, are going to be using O2, right, and producing CO2. Right? So the high PCO2. So this is the Siri interrupting me there. So so the tissues here, this high, kind of a high PCO2 level here and a low PO2 because the oxygen's being used there. That is going to cause, so again, this is the stimulus, number one. Number two, this is then going to cause the precapillary sphincters to dilate, bringing more oxygen-rich blood to those cells, and then taking oxygen poor or CO2-rich blood away from those tissues. So this is a local effect here. The nervous system is not involved with this. Right? These signals, this low PCO2, high PCO2 and low PO2, are signaling these smooth muscle cells here directly. They are sensitive to those levels. And then likewise, with a high PO2 and a low PCO2, so these are relatively inactive cells, relatively inactive, so they're not, not doing any sort of activity, right? But this is low here, so there's low usage of O2, right, and low production of CO2 here. So these precapillary sphincters here are, so this is again the stimulus, number one, is going to be a high, relatively high PO2 and a low PCO2 of the blood. So then what happens is that these precapillary sphincters, these smooth muscles here, will constrict, therefore diverting, so you're not going to have blood flowing to these cells, you're not going to necessarily have blood flowing away from them, so that you then divert this oxygen-rich blood to cells, to tissues that are actively using that O2. Okay? So you may want to, again, pause there, review that, take a second to organize it into maybe a little table for yourself there. Right? See the similarities and differences between what's going on at the tissue level with the blood flow, and then what's going on at the alveolar level with the blood flow and also then the bronchioles. Okay? So you should be able to now go back and describe and explain any sort of local regulation of respiration. Okay? We're going to handle the nervous system effects here in a different screencast. Right? Thanks for listening, and bring your questions to class.